Well, in for a penny, in for a pound. Now it's time to do a video on KTM. The opinion I have is probably slightly different to anything that's been on YouTube to any great degree from a lot of the content creators. So I just thought I would add my thoughts, being my many years of experience in the motor trade, over a decade in the motor trade, not just as a grunt, up in management as well, and a decade in the cycle trade. Gives me some level of insights into the sort of people we're talking about, but also having lived through the banking crisis, I think there's some parallels could be drawn to there. How many of you remember Fred Goodwin? Fred Goodwin was in charge of a bank. He was a salesman. He was spend, borrow, buy. So basically, he was a salesman with access to the sweetie jar, with no one holding him back or checking that he was making responsible decisions. So they bought various banks that essentially caused their downfall because they spent, and then the only reason why the business was staying afloat was because line go up. Now, what happens when line goes down? Simple. All the cracks that are covered over by money rolling into the business disappear, because it's just like having a water tank filling up with water with a crack in the pipe. If the crack gets bigger than the amount of water that can flow through the pipe, you're going to get no water in the water tank. And the same with the bank. And I think this is exactly what Mr. Peer has done with Peer Mobility. He's gone, line go up, spend money. Line go up, spend more money. Line go up again, spend more money. Flat line, spend money. So this means now they've got a frankly unsustainable £3 billion debt, or euro debt, or whatever it happens to be, or £3 billion debt. And relatively speaking, KTM is a small company. I don't subscribe to this theory that companies are too large to fail. I mean, you have to look at Enron. Enron was massive. Enron failed again for hands in the sweetie jar. Now, when it comes to the UK, it's probably slightly more nuanced than the rest of Europe. Some things are identical because we are Europeans and we have European habits and we do European things. So, for example, we have much stricter licensing rules on motorbikes. There was in the UK in particular in the 70s, there was a great push to eliminate motorbikes as a form of transport, as they were seen as antisocial. And there was a big drive to basically end it all. And what you've got is this push towards zero deaths, which is impossible, causing people to not use bicycles, as you can see, bicycles and motorbikes as utility. I mean, there's more bicycles now used as utility than there was a few years ago, I can tell you. Because the cost of living crisis, people have been looking for ways to save money, and a bicycle is fantastically cheap transport. But they have been cutting back on their expenditure on them. And with motorbikes, there are so few people that I can think of that actually rely on a motorbike as their actual physical transport, that they are discretionary spends. And with a war going on in Europe, with prices rising, with energy prices spiking, with pandemic costs still fundamentally being paid for, cost of living, well, certainly the UK has not been helped by incomes really since 2010. It's pretty much flatlined. So people are becoming steadily less affluent. And one statistic I saw recently was that in that period of the last government, the percentage of high earners actually dropped as well. So it's not just a case of the standard of living was being squeezed, but those people that were earning the incomes in the higher quartiles were reducing. So you take this back to KTM, and they are selling essentially a luxury product into a discretionary market. With certainly in Europe, people have been hit by all these same costs that we have, without the costs of leaving the European Union, clearly, but they've been hit by all these costs as well, and something has to give. So that's why for KTM, line goes down, and it's the same for all these other manufacturers that are selling luxury goods. So I notice with some interest that Honda has taken their Asian market only 350 model, and they have decided to bring it to Europe, which is, it's the right thing to do, because if they're going to capture any form of market share, it's going to be at that sort of easily attainable financial level. I know they've had their recalls on that bike recently, but they're a brand that people trust, and it will sell. And I notice from the reports from KTM that all their Bajaj produced bikes are still going to be available. So I don't know what's going to happen with them as a company. It's not going to stay the same, but then again, they've been bankrupt before, so why is it some strange feeling that they can be bankrupt again? I mean, if you remember, in the early 90s, they went bankrupt, and the company was split up in 4, and it was bought up by venture capitalists, and they just bought a bunch of random companies, and it was all aimless for a few years, and that went wrong. And lots of things went wrong before it was bought up by the Pierre Group. It will obviously be noticed that the Farad, the bicycle division, always remained separate to the motorcycle division from that bankruptcy. So WP Forks and all that was bought by Pierre, but the bicycle division remained separate. And I have seen comments elsewhere that BMW might be in trouble. I looked at their overall group financials, and they're not having it away, but they're not in any form of trouble. I mean, they were definitely, the motorbike division was definitely in trouble in the 80s before they came up with the GS, and that could have died a death then. And the whole company in the early 90s had a few disastrous financial decisions, but I think they're on a fairly solid footing, and I think that in general the automotive sector is struggling because China is struggling. I'm broadly speaking, for me, the biggest worry, I think, is that the Chinese economy goes into a full-blown recession, because the global economy is symbiotic. You can't chop off one part. I mean, there is a degree of problem. The Chinese economy is highly problematic for the rest of us. You've got to put it all down to the way that Nixon sorted out their free trade status, and they kind of didn't put an expiry or a sunset clause into their exemptions when they were behind. When Nixon did his thing, they were behind, and it was I do think it was the right thing to start them off entering back into the global market, but they really need to really start playing by the rules. So there will be another video that I'll do, obviously, because I'm quite enjoying this talking to camera videos on all of my second one. But this is quite interesting to sort of put my views out there, and maybe no one will watch them, and I'll just blowing them out there, and it's just nice to get it off my chest. But if anyone finds this stuff interesting, it's always nice that people listen to what I have to say, respect my views, hopefully, and if you don't agree with me, just say so in the comments. But just be human about it. So getting back to China, this is where I think the incoming American government may cause more of a problem by walloping on tariffs, so they're going to increase the costs for their consumers of goods. As far as I can tell, is that they're not talking about making any adjustments to their minimum wage status. So again, they're going to be facing a very similar squeeze to what we in the UK had over the last 14 years of declining incomes and rising prices. And if that happens, obviously reduced consumption. That will affect the Chinese economy. The Chinese economy will have reduced exports and therefore reduced consumption. And European and in global brands that rely on the Chinese market for part of their income or part of their production, well, obviously their costs increase, and as a result their margins reduce, their sales reduce, and if the Chinese economy is vital to their global business, they're going to be in trouble. One interesting factor that also popped up recently was the number of automotive dealers. And in fairness, automotive dealers, bicycle dealers, yeah, I'm going to put this into one section on at the end of this video. When I was in the motor trade, and I doubt it's changed much, the ROI for an automotive dealer was 1.5%. Now, putting that into context, I was speaking to a distributor a couple of years ago, 3 or 4 years ago now, and they do both e-bikes, which obviously I'm doing, and motorbikes. Now, they were saying to me that there is, you can either buy the item with the motorbikes, or you can put them on consignment, but you have to pay a fee. Now, a lot of these motorbike dealers, and this is pre-pandemic, were unable to fund the purchase of, we'll say, a sub £5,000 motorcycle, and then immediately sell it to a consumer. Did not have the money for one. They had to put it on consignment, pay the consignment fee, and then get the money in and pay the bill. This is obviously quite clear that even when the times were good, that there wasn't a lot of money sloshing around in these businesses. And it's the same in the bicycle trade as well. When you see seasonal trade and people try to earn something in the peak period and ride out the rough period when it's quiet. And this year we've had in the UK the same problem for both motorbikes and bicycles. We had a wet and horrible spring, an uninspiring summer, a sludgy autumn, and a sort of a nothingy winter. None of that is driving the casual or the casual consumer. I was going to say to go, do you know what? It's lovely sunny weather. I'm going to ride a bicycle this year. I'm going to enjoy it. Or, I really fancy getting into motorbiking and I'm going to get myself a classic 350 or insert other name here, 125 something, learn, whatever it is, take, or just put in to do my tests or whatever it happens to be. Just has not happened this year. Last year wasn't brilliant either. And that's the reason why inventory levels are rising, all these manufacturers, because dealers now, and I count myself as a dealer certainly for bicycles, are saying, no, we do not want to buy your stock. We have nowhere to put it. We have no one to buy it. And in the bicycle trade, there is no protection like there is in the automotive trade where things can be sold direct. So you're finding that a lot of these big companies are selling direct and cutting out the shops entirely. And if they could, I'm sure the motorcycle companies would, as would the car companies. But the protections are in place that there is a step in between the consumer and the factory, which I think is a good thing, because when you're buying such expensive and complicated items, you need a level of professionalism and advice that is separate just from the needs of a manufacturing plant. And all these things added together are just the reason why KTM is failing. I don't quite understand why everyone's going mental for Vogue when there's like 20 dealers in the UK. I'm sure they're selling a lot of bikes. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure it's really taking off. But they were going mad when there was one dealer. And yes, there will be more dealers, but 20 dealers is not great for a volume brand. But everyone's going, way, buy a Vogue. Well, yeah, maybe this year. And then what happens next year? When the early adopters stop, there's going to be no market. There's going to be 20 dealers, and there's going to be enough for 10 dealers, maybe. And all of a sudden, dealers are going to close because the early froth has disappeared from the brand, and all the early adopters have gone. And that is the danger. And then people will say, "Oh, look, a Vogue dealer's closing. They must be in trouble." No, they're not. It's just there is always like an early adopter wave for everything. There's always people out there that will buy the newest, latest thing. It's just the way it is. So I wouldn't buy into this thing about dealers just going pop just for the sake of the brands they represent. It's more systemic in the whole marketplace. So if you think they're too expensive, it's not because they're having it away, it's because that's how much it costs to run these places. I'll give you an example. Back in 2003, 2004 time, I sat down and I was working in an MG Rover garage in a management role. And people were always challenging, why does it cost even then? How can you justify what you are? And I thought, you know what? I'll sit down and I'll make a guess on a few things and how much work look at the rent and how much we pay for the building and rates and staff costs and energy costs. And I sort of did this sort of back of an envelope calculation, and I came to a figure of £3,500 a day in 2003. And I went to the group accountant and I said, look, I've done this maths. Am I close? Am I close? Have I got anywhere near where you are? And he said to me, he wouldn't tell me what the number is, obviously, but he said to me, yeah, you're in the ballpark. You're in the ballpark. So I don't know if I was over, under, or whatever. But we're talking a showroom that had 4 cars inside, maybe 6 ramps. There was a body shop that had been closed. There was a parts department, maybe a pitch for 70 cars. I'm going from memory now. Obviously, I clearly can't look it up. So you had the inventory, the staff, and a £3,500 payment every single day to make those doors stay open. That's quite frightening. I for me, in my small little place, I couldn't even imagine earning that amount. But you just think, you get your bike serviced for £100. You get your car serviced for £100 to £300. They still have to, even on those figures, think how many of those services do they have to do, how many cars they have to sell with the margin to just hit that figure every day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year. It's hard, isn't it? Now, this is not obviously a sympathy video. Go out and be really sympathetic to all these car dealers and go, here, have all my money, you need it. But it's just to give you an idea that people don't seem to appreciate physically how much it costs to walk through the door and open them for the public. They just think it's their money disappearing straight into profits. It'd be nice. It'd be really nice. It's not true. But anyway, thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to my ramblings. If you got this far, you're all amazing. And I will catch you in the next one.